Do you ever feel like time is sprinting past you while you're just standing still? Like one minute you're blowing candles on your 18th birthday, and the next thing you know, you're Googling, why does my back hurt when I sit too long? You're not crazy. Life does feel like it's passing too fast. And guess what? Science, history, and psychology all have something to say about it. Tonight, we're diving into the weird, funny, and slightly depressing reasons why time slips away from us and why your 20s felt like a whole decade, but your 30s feel like one long weekend. Episode 8: Why Life Feels Like It's Passing Too Fast. What is happening, Sleepless Society? And welcome back to the show that validates all your late-night anxieties. I'm your host, and tonight we are tackling the biggest, sneakiest thief of them all. Time is the one thing you can't buy, you can't save, and you definitely can't get back. We all get the same 24 hours in a day, but somehow that time feels like it's shrinking. The weeks blend into months, the months into years, until you find yourself looking in the mirror wondering how you got here. Is it a conspiracy? A glitch in the matrix? Or is there something deeper going on inside our own heads? Well, it turns out the answer is a fascinating mix of all of the above, minus the matrix part, probably. So settle in for a real deep dive, because we're about to unpack why time feels like it's slipping through our fingers like sand, and what, if anything, we can do about it. Chapter 1: The Science of Why Time Speeds Up. To really get to the bottom of this feeling, we have to start inside our own heads, with the gelatinous 3-pound supercomputer that's running the whole show. The brain. Now, your brain can calculate the trajectory of a thrown ball, recognize a face it hasn't seen in 20 years, and compose poetry. But there's one thing it is shockingly, almost comically bad at: keeping objective time. There is no tiny quartz crystal in your head vibrating at a perfect frequency. Our perception of time is not a clock, it's a story. It's a reconstruction, a subjective feeling woven together from memory, attention, emotion, and most importantly, the amount of new information it's being forced to process. And the master variable that controls the speed of this story is a single, powerful concept: novelty. Let's rewind the tape. Go back to being a kid, say 8 years old. What did a summer vacation feel like? It was a glorious, infinite epoch. It was a sprawling, uncharted continent of time, stretching from the last school bell in June to the dreaded back-to-school ads in late August. It was an eternity filled with the smell of chlorine, the taste of popsicles, the feeling of scraped knees, and the slow, agonizing crawl to your next birthday. Each day was its own adventure, distinct and memorable. Now, contrast that with your last proper 2-week vacation as an adult. Be honest. You blinked, didn't you? You remember the stress of packing, the relief of logging off from work, a brief montage of you in a different location, and then the crushing Sunday night dread of returning to reality. It felt less like a vacation and more like a commercial break. The reason for this temporal distortion isn't magic, it's neuroscience. When you're a child, the world is a fire hose of new data. Almost every experience is a first. The first time you see the ocean, the first time you solve a puzzle, the first time you understand a joke, your brain is in a state of constant high-alert learning. It's furiously building its model of how the world works, forging billions of new neural connections. Every sight, sound, and smell is potentially vital information. This process of absorbing and encoding new, dense information requires an immense amount of neural resources. The hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped region deep in your brain, is working overtime. It acts as a kind of novelty detector, flagging new experiences as important and worthy of being written into long-term memory. Because the brain is working so hard and logging so much detailed, unique data, the subjective experience is that time is stretched out. It feels slow because every moment is informationally rich. The mental file size for a single day in childhood is massive, packed with high-resolution sensory details and emotional weight. Now, slam the fast-forward button to adulthood. What is the defining feature of most adult lives? Routine. We are creatures of habit. We wake up at the same time, drink the same coffee, drive the same route to work, perform a series of familiar tasks, interact with the same people, come home and choose from a limited menu of evening activities. Routines are essential for survival. They conserve precious mental energy. When a task becomes a habit, it's moved from the conscious, effortful part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, to the automatic, subconscious parts, the basal ganglia. We can perform complex actions, like driving a car, while thinking about something else entirely. This is called neural chunking. It's incredibly efficient. But this efficiency is the silent killer of perceived time. When your brain is on autopilot, it's not receiving novel information. It recognizes the pattern, yes, another Tuesday morning commute, and decides it doesn't need to waste energy recording the details. Why would it? It already has thousands of nearly identical memories stored away. So instead of creating a new detailed memory file, it simply tags the experience as another one of those. At the end of the year, when you look back, your brain doesn't have 365 unique, detailed days to review. It has a handful of landmark events, a birthday, a trip, a major project, and then a whole lot of heavily compressed generic files labeled work, commute, and watching TV. This is a biological process called memory compression. It's the brain's version of creating a zip file. It takes a month of repetitive workdays, pulls out anything unusual, and discards the rest, leaving you with a tiny, summarized file. Because the file is so small, your retrospective judgment is that the period of time it represents must have been short. The time wasn't lost, it just wasn't recorded. This is the great deception. You were present for all those hours, but because you were not paying attention to anything new, your brain effectively hit the delete key on the mundane. That's why your 20s, a decade often filled with massive life changes, new cities, new jobs, new relationships, can feel like a lifetime, while your 30s, if you've settled into a stable routine, can feel like a long weekend. So here's the sarcastic twist. Your brain is not just a terrible calendar app. It's a ruthless film editor. It looks at the raw footage of your life and says, okay, the first trip to Paris, that's a keeper. Beautiful cinematography. The 4,732 times you drove to Target, boring, filler, cut it, all of it. The result is that the movie of your life gets shorter and shorter in the editing room with each passing year. Not because there was less footage, but because the director got bored with the script. And we are the ones writing that repetitive, boring script every single day we choose routine over novelty. Chapter 2. The History of Time Anxiety. This feeling, this pervasive modern dread that time is slipping away and we're not keeping up, feels like a uniquely 21st century problem. We point fingers at our smartphones, the relentless 24-hour news cycle, and the crushing weight of hustle culture. But if we pull back the lens, we see that our anxiety isn't new. It's an ancient heirloom passed down through generations. Humanity has been in a desperate, often losing battle to understand, control, and conquer time since we first noticed the sun rising and setting. Our current state of time sickness is just the latest chapter in a long and tortured history. Let's begin in a world without clocks, a world governed by natural, cyclical time. For early civilizations, time wasn't a straight line to be managed. It was a repeating circle of seasons, lunar phases, and celestial movements. Their relationship with time was deeply intertwined with the earth. An agricultural society's entire existence depended on correctly interpreting these cycles. If you planted your wheat too early, a late frost could kill it. If you harvested too late, the autumn rains could ruin your crop. This wasn't an anxiety about being 5 minutes late to a meeting. It was a profound existential anxiety about community survival. Time wasn't an abstract concept. It was a powerful, often fickle deity. They built monolithic structures like Stonehenge in England and the Newgrange Passage Tomb in Ireland, not just as temples, but as massive, sophisticated calendars designed to align with the solstices. They were desperate attempts to pin down time, to predict its behavior, to appease it. The Egyptians, whose lives were dictated by the annual flooding of the Nile, created one of the first 365-day calendars. Their anxiety was about cosmic order, or Ma'at. A disruption in the predictable flow of time meant a descent into chaos. Even the ancient philosophers were obsessed. The Greeks gave us Kronos, the god who devoured his own children, a terrifyingly apt metaphor for how time consumes all things. Philosophers like Heraclitus noted that you cannot step into the same river twice, recognizing the relentless, ever-changing flow of time. The Roman Stoics, particularly Seneca, wrote extensively on the shortness of life. He argued that life isn't inherently short, but that we make it short by wasting our time on trivialities. He urged people to live with intention, to treat their time as their most precious, non-renewable resource. This sounds remarkably like a modern self-help guru, proving that people have been procrastinating and feeling guilty about it for at least 2,000 years. For centuries, this natural, cyclical sense of time dominated. But then came a profound, world-altering shift. The transition began in medieval monasteries, where monks needed to pray at specific, fixed times throughout the day and night. They developed early mechanical clocks driven by weights and gears, with bells that would toll the canonical hours. This was the first major step in divorcing human activity from the natural cycle of the sun. But the true revolution, the one that put all of humanity on the clock, was the Industrial Revolution. The factory floor is the birthplace of modern time anxiety. In an agricultural world, work was task-oriented. You worked until the field was plowed. In the factory, work became time-oriented. You worked for a set number of hours. The invention of the reliable, affordable clock and its placement in public town squares and on factory walls changed everything. The factory whistle, not the rooster, now dictated when your day began and ended. Your life was now segmented into abstract, interchangeable units, hours, minutes, seconds. And with the advent of wage labor, this famous phrase from Benjamin Franklin became the mantra of a new age: time is money. This was a seismic shift in human consciousness. If time is a resource that can be spent, it can also be wasted. The concept of wasting time as a moral failing is a direct product of the industrial age. It created a new kind of pressure, the pressure of productivity. You had to account for your hours. Time spent idle was time you weren't earning, weren't producing, weren't contributing. This mindset bled from the factory into every aspect of life. Schedules, timetables, and deadlines began to govern society. The leisurely flowing river of natural time had been dammed, channeled, and divided into a rigid, unforgiving grid. This new linear, finite view of time also amplified an old philosophical idea, memento mori, remember you will die. In the Victorian era, this became a cultural obsession. With scientific advancement chipping away at religious faith, people were confronted with the stark reality of their own mortality in a new way. They were acutely aware that their clock was ticking. This wasn't just a philosophical musing, it was a source of deep, pervasive anxiety. They became obsessed with legacy, with making their mark, with not wasting their allotted span of time. And that brings us directly to today. We are the inheritors of this entire legacy of anxiety. We have the farmer's fear of missing life seasons, marriage, career, etc., combined with the factory worker's fear of wasting a single productive minute. Our technology has simply put this anxiety on steroids. Our digital calendars schedule our lives down to 15-minute increments. Our phones provide an endless stream of distractions, which we then feel guilty for indulging in because we're wasting time. We are constantly bombarded by the highlight reels of others' lives on social media, making us feel like we're not using our own time productively or excitingly enough. The hustle culture that glorifies burnout is just the factory owner's mindset turned into a personal brand. It's no wonder life feels like it's speeding up. We've taken the beautiful, cyclical nature of existence and forced it into a brutally efficient, unforgiving linear spreadsheet. And we are constantly terrified of the numbers not adding up. Ancient people feared missing the harvest. We fear missing a Netflix episode or an email notification. Truly, we've evolved. Chapter 3: The Psychology of Time and Aging. We've covered the neuroscience of novelty and the historical weight of the clock. But there's another critical piece of this puzzle, one that everyone over the age of 25 feels in their bones. It's the undeniable, almost physical sensation that with each passing year, the accelerator pedal of time gets pushed a little further to the floor. The cliché your grandparents told you is true. Time speeds up as you get older. This isn't just a feeling or a poetic metaphor. It's a consistent and predictable feature of human psychology, and there are several fascinating and slightly unsettling reasons why. The most famous and intuitive explanation is what's known as the proportional theory. It's a simple but powerful idea based on ratios. Your perception of the length of a period of time is relative to the total amount of time you've already lived. Let's break that down. When you are 5 years old, one single year, the journey from your 5th birthday to your 6th, constitutes a whopping 20% of your entire life. It's a monumental chunk of your existence. It's a fifth of everything you've ever known. It is, proportionally, a very, very long time. Now fast forward to when you're 50. 1 year, from age 50 to 51, is now only 2% of your life. It's a tiny fraction, a statistical sliver of your total experience. From a purely mathematical standpoint, each subsequent year of your life is a progressively smaller percentage of the whole, so of course it feels shorter. Your brain, in its own weird intuitive way, is doing this math. It's judging the size of a year against the backdrop of your entire lifespan. The pie is getting bigger, but the slice you get each year is the same absolute size, making it feel relatively smaller and smaller. It's the reason why waiting 1 week for Christmas as a child feels like a form of cruel and unusual punishment, while as an adult, you can blink in October and suddenly it's New Year's Eve. Building on this is the role of memory and what we discussed earlier, the firsts. Our lives are not remembered as a continuous, even-flowing stream. They are remembered as a series of landmark events. Psychologists have identified a fascinating phenomenon called the reminiscence bump. When you ask older adults to recall memories from their lives, they disproportionately remember events that happened between the ages of about 15 and 25. Why that specific window? Because it's a period of life that is absolutely saturated with firsts. Your first love, your first heartbreak, your first car, your first time living away from home, your first real job. It's a decade of intense identity formation, emotional volatility, and profound novelty. Each of these firsts acts as a thick, heavy anchor in your memory, a bolded chapter heading in the story of your life. After this period, for many people, life settles down. The firsts become fewer and farther between. You have your first child, perhaps, or your first mortgage, but the sheer density of novel, life-defining events decreases dramatically. As a result, the decades after the reminiscence bump can feel compressed and emptier in retrospect. They have fewer unique anchors to stretch them out in our memory. This leads us to another bizarre quirk of our minds, our complete inability to accurately place events on a timeline. The process is known as temporal telescoping. It works in two ways. We tend to think that very distant events happened more recently than they did, forward telescoping, and that recent events happened longer ago than they did, backward telescoping. This is why the 1990s might feel like they were about 15 years ago, not 30. Your brain isn't consulting a calendar, it's judging the distance to a memory based on the number of other significant landmark memories between then and now. Since your teens and 20s were so dense with memories, the reminiscence bump, the distance to that era feels shorter. There are a lot of points of interest on that mental map. But the last few years, if they've been routine-heavy, might be a memory desert with few landmarks. So when you think of that vacation you took 3 years ago, your brain crosses that desert and thinks, wow, that feels like it was a long time ago, even though, objectively, it's much closer than the 90s. This is the source of that constant disorienting feeling that your internal timeline is broken. Because it is. It's not a ruler. It's a warped piece of elastic, stretched out in some places and compressed in others. So yes, when you remember the year 2000 and the Y2K panic, and it feels like a decade ago, take a deep breath. It's been a quarter of a century. You can cry about it. It's a perfectly rational response. Finally, there might even be a biological, physical reason for this perceived acceleration. Some neuroscientists have proposed theories related to our internal biological clock. As we age, our metabolism slows down. Our heart rate decreases. Even the rate at which our neurons fire might change. The theory goes that our internal pacemaker or tick rate gets slower as we get older. If our internal clock is ticking more slowly, then the outside world, which continues to move at the same objective pace, will appear to be passing by much faster in comparison. It's like watching a movie in fast forward, because your own projector is running at half speed. While this is still more of a hypothesis than a proven fact, it's a compelling idea. It suggests that this feeling isn't just in our minds. It might be rooted in the very physiology of our aging bodies. It's the cruelest biological joke. The more life you've lived and the less of it you have left, the faster it seems to disappear. The only thing that seems to defy this rule is your phone battery at 3%. That at least vanishes at a universally understood and terrifyingly fast pace, regardless of your age. Chapter 4. How to slow down time, sort of. All right, let's take a collective deep breath. We've established that our brains are lazy editors, our culture is a pressure cooker of productivity, and our own biology is playing a cruel trick on us. It's a trifecta of temporal theft. It's easy to feel helpless, like we're just passengers on a bullet train heading towards the inevitable. But what if we're not? What if there are ways to pull the emergency brake, or at least to make the scenery outside the window less of a blur? The good news is, there are. We cannot objectively slow down time. We can't add a 25th hour to the day. But we absolutely can change our perception of it. We can learn to stretch our experience of time, to make it feel fuller, richer, and more substantial. And the techniques for doing so are all about consciously fighting back against the brain's default settings of routine and autopilot. The number one, undisputed champion of slowing down perceived time is, you guessed it, novelty. We have to actively and intentionally inject newness into our lives. We have to give our lazy brain editor new, interesting footage that it can't just leave on the cutting room floor. This doesn't mean you need to sell all your possessions and join a nomadic tribe, though, for the record, that would almost certainly make time feel incredibly slow. Novelty can be practiced on a micro and macro level. Let's start with the macro. Big life changes, moving to a new city, starting a new career, traveling to an unfamiliar country, are powerful time stretchers. Think about the last time you traveled somewhere completely new. The first few days, in particular, probably felt incredibly long. Every street corner was new, every meal was an experiment, every interaction was a challenge. Your brain was in hyperdrive, absorbing, processing, and encoding a massive amount of information. You were creating dozens of unique, vivid memories every single day. That's why a 2-week vacation can leave you with more distinct memories than an entire 6 months of your normal routine. You are force-feeding your brain novelty, and the result is an expanded sense of time. But we can't all just pack up and leave. The real challenge is finding what I call micro-novelty in our everyday lives. It's about breaking the small, unconscious routines that lull our brains to sleep. For example, take your commute. Do you take the exact same route every single day? Try a different one. It might take longer, but the goal isn't efficiency, it's experience. Your brain will have to engage, navigate, and pay attention to new landmarks. Listen to a new type of music or a podcast on a subject you know nothing about. At lunch, don't just go to your usual spot. Try that weird-looking restaurant you've always walked past. At home, cook a new recipe instead of one of your 5 go-tos. Read a book from a genre you normally avoid. Even something as simple as rearranging the furniture in your living room can work. It forces your brain to remap a familiar space, breaking the autopilot. Each of these tiny disruptions is a small act of defiance against memory compression. They are a way of telling your brain, pay attention, this is new. This moment is worth recording. The second powerful tool is mindfulness. If novelty is about changing what you do, mindfulness is about changing how you do it. Mindfulness is the practice of pulling your awareness out of the chaotic rush of past regrets and future anxieties and anchoring it firmly in the present moment. Most of the time, we are not truly present. We're eating lunch while thinking about a work email. We're talking to our partner while scrolling through our phone. We're in the shower planning our day. We are time traveling in our own minds, and the one place we rarely are is right here, right now. Mindfulness is the antidote. It's about paying deliberate, non-judgmental attention to your senses. When you're drinking your morning coffee, don't just gulp it down. Take a moment to actually smell it. Feel the warmth of the mug. Notice the complex tastes. This act of focused attention transforms a routine action into a rich sensory experience. It turns a compressed throwaway moment into a distinct memory. You can do this with anything: washing the dishes, walking the dog, listening to music. By being fully present, you are manually overriding your brain's desire to skim over the familiar. You are turning a mundane moment into a first time every time. Finally, there's the power of awe and storytelling. Psychologists have found that the emotion of awe, that feeling you get when you encounter something vast and overwhelming, like staring up at a starry night sky, looking out over the Grand Canyon, or listening to a piece of soul-stirring music, has a profound effect on our time perception. Experiences of awe make us feel like we have more time. They make the present moment feel expansive and boundless. Actively seeking out moments of awe can be a potent way to break the feeling of being rushed. And after you have these experiences, novel, mindful, or awe-inspiring, tell someone about them, or write them down in a journal. The act of creating a narrative, of turning a raw experience into a story, helps to solidify it in your memory. It gives it structure and significance, ensuring it doesn't just fade into the blur. So, the ultimate twist is this: maybe the goal isn't to stop time, or even to slow it down. The goal is to fill it with enough attention, enough novelty, enough wonder, and enough story that it doesn't feel like it's slipping away unnoticed. It's about living a life that's less like a quick, forgettable sitcom and more like a long, dense, unforgettable novel. And there you have it. Why life feels like it's passing too fast, and why it's not just you, it's literally how our brains are wired. If you made it through this entire episode, congratulations. You just consciously slowed down and experienced a full hour of your life by learning something new. That's a win. Now, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about the moment in your life that felt way too fast, and check out the next episode of Sleepless Society right here. Until then, don't blink, you might miss it. Stay curious, everyone.